Chapter 689. Isabella said coldly at Wilbur's question, "Are you questioning our abilities?" "I'm not. It's just that there's no point in numbers if this is a paranormal incident," Wilbur replied earnestly. Isabella raised an eyebrow and said, "Honestly, I'm skeptical about your department. Are there really paranormal events in the world? Isn't it staring at you in the face right now? You're an aura-level cultivator yourself. Shouldn't you have some understanding of paranormal phenomena?" Wilbur asked. Isabella was taken aback as she measured Wilbur from head to toe. After a long time, she slowly said, "Fine, I'll be your guide. Let me see what the Department of Paranormal Research and Defense is capable of." After that, Isabella immediately ordered her subordinates to fill the trunk of her car with water and military rations, as well as a few buckets of gasoline. "Shall we?" Isabella got into the car, looking at Wilbur and Ryder calmly. Wilbur knew that Isabella was not very happy about the situation. However, he did not want to explain that much, and Ryder did not like talking either. The two of them got in the car, sitting in the back seat. Isabella said nothing and stepped on the gas. The engine roared as they left the department. At about 2 in the afternoon, the car was driving along the desert. As far as the eye could see, sand dunes rose and fell, matching the scorching sun and creating a magnificent landscape. Wilbur enjoyed the unique scenery of the desert and felt extremely relaxed. It had been a long time since he came to somewhere so beautiful. However, Isabella said at that moment, "Don't be fooled by the beauty here. The further we go, the more dangerous it will be. This desert is famous for constantly shifting. The roads can disappear at any moment, and we could be caught in a sandstorm at any time as well. This place is 330,000 square kilometers wide. The moment you get lost, you'll be in incredible danger." 330 square kilometers. If a normal person got lost, it would be as good as a death sentence. It would probably be dangerous for an ambience-level cultivator as well. After all, they were talking about hundreds of thousands of kilometers. It was not the distance that one could walk out even over 10 days. Not eating for 10 days was one thing, but 10 days without water would be hard even for an ambience-level cultivator. Even those at the sanctuary level would have problems not eating or drinking for a month. If we're caught in a sandstorm, even our satellite phone will lose signal. So don't think of this as an easy trip, Isabella explained. Wilbur shrugged and said, "Thank you for your information." Since Isabella had doubts about them, Wilbur did not say much. Just like that, they arrived in the middle of the desert at about 5 in the afternoon. At that moment, a convoy of cars actually appeared in front of them, slowly moving forward. There were 7 vehicles in total, and all of them were off-road vehicles. Isabella frowned and immediately sped past them, stopping the cars. Wilbur and Ryder watched on from inside the car. A few people got out of the car in the lead. Their faces were all covered in veils, and they had training outfits on. They were all tall and sturdy. Isabella scrutinized them and asked, "What are you doing here?" "We're on vacation." "What about you?" a man said with a hoarse voice. Isabella showed her identification and said, "Anti-terrorism department. State your identity and purpose." They fell silent for a moment before they slowly said, "We're just off-road enthusiasts from Tark City. We have our credentials with us. This is just a voluntary desert event." Wilbur looked over. A few men in the vehicles behind them had already picked up submachine guns. An aura-level cultivator could not take so many shots. Wilbur got out of the car and walked in front of Isabella. "We're still busy. Let's not waste our time here, okay? They're very suspicious. I need to inspect their vehicles right now. Tell everyone to exit the vehicles and raise their hands above their heads. Stand in a line away from the cars." Isabella drew her pistol, pointing it at the man in the lead as she shouted out. The man fell silent for a moment before he looked at the cars behind him. Chapter 690. Wilbur frowned and said, "Can we reach our destination before it gets dark? Let's stop wasting everyone's time." Wilbur knew there was something wrong with that group of people. He even spotted a rocket launcher in one of the vehicles. He was not afraid, but he could not be sure that he would be able to protect Isabella. So, he did not want to start any conflicts. When Isabella heard that, she looked at the man and said, "The area up ahead isn't suited for off-roading. You should turn back. All right, officer, the man replied in a low voice. They're from the Red Sand clan, Isabella said as she drove. Wilbur was taken aback. It looks like you knew. What does the Red Sand clan do? Tomb raiding, robbery, you name it. They're a typical violent criminal gang, Isabella explained. Wilbur smiled and said, Then why did you let them go? There are far fewer of us, and they have heavy weaponry. I was worried that you too would be in danger, Isabella said coldly. Wilbur was stunned as he asked, You were worried about us? Yes. If you weren't here, I would have taken action against them just now. Miss Elsher, I think you don't fully understand the combat abilities of our department, Wilbur said with a smile. Isabella said coldly as she drove, You might be good at a fight, and your friend has a super weapon with him. However, there are only 3 of us. If you get injured or die, the higher-ups will have my head. I mean, my friend is an ambience-level cultivator. Do you really think we're weak? Wilbur asked. Isabella said, So what? Can an ambience-level cultivator take on a rocket launcher or a Barrett? I guess you're right. Wilbur smiled. An ambience-level cultivator might be able to take one blast or avoid a heavy-duty sniper. However, it would be very dangerous to face a barrage of attacks. If a few rocket launchers were used against an ambience-level cultivator, they would be on the verge of death if they survived the initial blast. Meanwhile, a heavy sniper like the Barrett was enough to threaten an ambience-level cultivator's life. An aura-level cultivator like Isabella would be in even more danger. That was probably why she decided against taking action. At that moment, Isabella picked up the satellite phone in the car. I'm Isabella. I noticed the Red Sand clan on the desert roads. Send a medium-sized squad as backup. Understood. Sending reinforcements right now. Maintain contact. Isabella hung up and continued forward. Wilbur nodded approvingly. They were really efficient. A medium-sized squad was usually about 300 people. It was more than enough for the numbers they saw just now. As they constantly advanced, the sky slowly darkened. However, Isabella had no plans to stop. After filling up the car with some gasoline, she continued forward into the night. It was hard to see anything at night in the desert beyond where their lights illuminated. Ryder kept a stern look on his face as he gazed ahead. Meanwhile, Wilbur was bored, so he closed his eyes to meditate. A few hours passed, and the car alarm suddenly sounded. Wilbur opened his eyes to see Isabella solemnly looking at a screen in the car, saying, There's a sandstorm warning. It's a high-level one, so we have to stop. Wilbur sighed. It seemed like he was quite unlucky. Why couldn't the task go smoothly so he could go back to Sea Lake Island to enjoy himself? Thinking about that, Wilbur felt the urge to resign rising up in him again. Damn it. Once I'm done with this mission, I'm not doing anything anymore. He viciously swore to himself. At that moment, the desert had already stirred up a fierce sandstorm. Isabella drove the car to the side of a sand dune and stopped, closing all the windows and any openings on the car. Whether or not we can leave tomorrow will depend on our luck, Isabella said. Wilbur frowned and said, Is a desert sandstorm really that powerful? Chapter 691. A large-scale sandstorm can alter the landscape, making it hard to determine which direction we are heading. If that's the case, our operation might have to be terminated, Isabella said. Wilbur sighed and thought, Had I known this would happen, I would have just come alone. Regardless, sending Isabella and Ryder back at this point seemed impossible, so they could only wait. The 3 sat in the car and listened to the wind blowing outside in silence. Such a situation could be deadly, and disasters could take place at any moment. It was a dangerous situation for Isabella and Ryder, but not for Wilbur because he could float in the air to find his way back at any time since he was at the sanctuary level. The sandstorm raged for the entire night and only stopped the next morning. Isabella tried opening the car door, only to realize that it would not budge. It took quite a few tries for her to finally open the door. At that point, they realized that half of the car was buried in sand. Isabella, Wilbur, and Ryder squeezed through the gaps they managed to open and stared at the sight before them helplessly. The road was completely covered by sand and was nowhere to be seen. Even if they managed to get the car out, they would not be able to drive it. What surprised them, however, was spotting a Unimog passing by a few miles away. It was a top-class tractor with a luxurious interior that cost over $1.5 million. Three people exited the tractor, dressed in attire suitable for traveling in a desert. Wilbur recognized that they were the same two men and the woman he ran into on the plane. What a small world! The three spotted Wilbur and the others as well, but ignored them. The muscular man proceeded to unload 3 UTVs from the tractor. They loaded a few large bags before getting ready to depart. Just then, Isabella shouted, "Wait a minute. What are you doing here? Why is this woman so nosy?" Wilbur thought to himself. The group simply ignored her, and she strode toward them and showed them her badge before standing in their way. "Stop the car. I need to inspect your belongings." "Scram! Don't get in my way," the man who wore a suit said coldly. Her expression darkened and she pulled out her gun. "Say that again?" The man scoffed and said, "I can crush you right here. Don't piss me off or get in my way." "Understood." The muscular man next to him took a step forward and glared coldly at Isabella. Isabella raised her gun and said, "This is a restricted area. You are not allowed here without a permit. Rules don't apply to me. Get out of my way if you want to live," the man responded. Furious, Isabella reached out to grab the muscular man, her aura surging. The muscular man simply scoffed and threw a punch at her. Isabella grunted in pain and backed a few steps away, her left arm slumping powerlessly. The man darted forward to grab Isabella's gun, not giving her the time to respond. Shocked, Isabella took 2 steps back and fired up her aura. Wind began to gather around her, and sand started to swirl. Just then, Wilbur closed the 10-meter gap between them with a leap and stood between the two. "How dare you attack an officer?" he asked. Although he did not enjoy Isabella's nosy nature, he could not simply stand idly by as she faced danger, so he had no choice but to interfere. Chapter 692. The man spotted Wilbur too. He looked at Wilbur warily and said, "Mind your own business, or you will die." He then waved his arm and the trio got into their UTVs before driving off. "My gun!" Isabella shouted. Wilbur frowned. "Don't worry. We will see them again." "What?" she asked. Wilbur sighed. "Isn't it obvious? They are here for the ruins as well. We will see them again once we reach the ruins." Isabella's expression darkened. She turned around and picked up the satellite phone. Shortly after, she set it down and gazed up at the sky. Although the sandstorm had ceased, the sky above was still shrouded in dense yellow clouds, preventing sunlight from penetrating through. "There's no signal," she said and sighed. Wilbur chuckled. "Let's walk then." She glanced at the compass she wore around her wrist and said, "We're heading north. The ruins are roughly 300 kilometers away. We might need a day to get there." "Let's hurry then," Wilbur said. Isabella opened the back trunk of the car and moved all the food and water out. "Let's take all of these." Wilbur simply picked them up and threw them into the demoplane. As she watched everything disappearing in Wilbur's hand, Isabella's eyes widened as though she had seen a ghost. Wilbur smiled. "It's the latest technology in the Department of Paranormal Research and Defense. It's too advanced for me to showcase how it works." After a long pause, Isabella turned and started marching forward. Wilbur turned to Ryder. "What a stubborn girl." Ryder remained quiet and followed Isabella's steps. Wilbur shook his head at how dull it was to be on a mission with these two people. Along the way, the trio rarely spoke except for when they stopped to eat. No one knew what happened to the ruins, and there were countless secrets awaiting them. Ryder was never a talkative man, and Isabella seemed to be upset with Wilbur, so she remained quiet as well. "Say, isn't this boring?" Wilbur whined. He did not particularly enjoy small talk but wanted to resolve his differences with Isabella. After all, they were now colleagues and it would not be ideal for them to turn on each other. "You think I'm nosy, right?" Isabella asked coldly. "That's right," Wilbur said frankly. Isabella continued walking and said, "If you had seen all our fellow comrades who fell on the battlefield, you'd know why I'm nosy. Instead, you abused your title at the Department of Paranormal Research and Defense and mocked others." "Well, I guess I didn't consider that. Sorry, he said. Wilbur apologized sincerely as he knew how dangerous these missions could be for ordinary soldiers. Battles had always been rough and merciless, so countless soldiers perished each year. Hence, it was understandable for Isabella to be wary of everything around her. Isabella's expression eased upon hearing his apology. We need to hurry. If those 3 people are heading for the ruins as well, we are too far behind, she said. Yeah. We aren't just going there for a treasure hunt, though. So many people have gone missing there. I assume it's going to be quite dangerous and challenging for one to get inside, Wilbur commented. Isabella nodded in agreement and the 3 picked up their pace. At 4 in the afternoon, they arrived at a basin. Isabella glanced at the compass and compared the map in her hands with a frown. This should be the spot. Where isn't there anything here? There is something. Wilbur pointed at a tent not far away. It was a military tent specifically made for deserts, so one may not notice it at first glance. Behind the tent were the UTVs that were covered. That's them. Let's head over there, Isabella said. Chapter 693. Wilbur knew that he would have to deal with that man, or he would not be able to execute his mission. Luckily, they were all in an isolated land, so he could take the time to observe what they were going to do. The 3 approached a tent, and the muscular man started staring coldly at them as soon as they approached. The man was setting up a device that looked like a radar and showed no intention of bothering himself over their presence. The woman stood next to the man and glanced at Wilbur before lowering her head to help. What are you doing? Where's my gun? Isabella questioned. The man did not even turn his head around and said, Logan, kill them. Isabella's expression darkened. Logan strode toward Isabella. The tremendous power emanating from him caused the sand to swirl around him. Isabella paled. She had never sensed such powerful energy. His energy was so overpowering that she struggled to gather her own spiritual energy under its pressure. Even breathing felt difficult, yet such pressure was the result of sheer, absolute power, and there was no trace of spiritual energy coming from Logan. Wilbur frowned. Cultivators who trained solely on their physical power were rare, and in Logan's case, he was likely at the sanctuary level. For one to reach the sanctuary level based on physical strength alone, he would have to be extremely talented. He took a large step forward and pulled Isabella back so that he was positioned before her. An invisible force instantly cancelled out the horrifying pressure from Logan. Isabella let out a long sigh of relief, then turned to look at Wilbur in surprise. Ryder set the box down to open it, but Wilbur simply said, "That's not necessary." Ryder picked the box up and started backing away, not stopping until he was 100 meters away. Just then, the man turned around to glance at Wilbur. Sanctuary level? Bingo, Wilbur said. The man chuckled and glanced at the woman next to him. The woman quietly walked toward Logan, which baffled Wilbur. He sensed no spiritual energy from the woman, nor did she seem to be a power cultivator like Logan. Was she going to join the fight too? Just then, Logan roared, and spiritual flames ignited on both his fists, with runes dancing within the flames. A terrifying force instantly enveloped an area of over 10 meters. The gravel on the ground began to condense and contract under the immense pressure. "Get back," Wilbur said. Isabella knew that she was powerless in this fight and could only hurry toward Ryder. "Can he handle this?" Isabella asked worriedly. Ryder frowned. "I don't know." "You don't?" she asked, flustered. Ryder remained quiet. At the same time, dozens of figures appeared on the other end of the basin. Upon spotting them, the group set up 2 Barrett rifles and 3 rocket launchers before aiming them at Isabella and the others. The leader took his mask off, revealing a thick beard underneath. He lit a cigarette and stared at Wilbur and the others coldly. The Red Sand Clan. Isabella frowned nervously. Logan was obviously formidable, and with the Red Sand Clan's involvement along with their heavy weaponry, they were all in a dangerous situation. Ryder shot her a look, opened the box he was carrying, and swiftly assembled the super cannon. He then pulled Isabella to lay on the ground. "Just focus on protecting yourself for now." "Are we not going to help Wilbur?" Isabella asked. "He will live," Ryder replied expressionlessly. Just then, the situation changed once again as rumbling was heard throughout the basin. Chapter 694. Everyone turned to look at the basin in astonishment. In the basin, sand flowed down like an hourglass. In just a few minutes, a dilapidated city appeared in the basin. The basin was over a dozen kilometers in diameter, but the city itself was around 7 to 8 kilometers in size. In the center of the city stood a gray, ancient castle. Many surrounding structures, some even missing half, surrounded the castle. However, the crisscrossing streets still barely retained traces of their former glory. In ancient times, having a city in a place like this was considered quite an accomplishment. But now, it was merely a ruin that had suffered the ravages of time and was left in a state of utter decay. Miraculously, the castle radiated a colorful glow like a hidden gem. At the same time, an invisible energy fluctuation continuously emanated from the castle, filling the entire ruin and then rippling through everyone present. Overjoyed, the man shouted, "It's here! Logan, kill him and we'll go in." Logan glanced around hesitantly, while the Red Sand Clan started walking toward Wilbur. Wilbur remained standing with his eyes on the ruins, seemingly unaware that Logan was approaching. On the other end, members of the Red Sand Clan were all thrilled. "Boss, what should we do now? Should we go inside now or take care of these people first?" someone asked. The bearded men smoked and said, "Jackie and Jamie will go inside with me. The rest of you will stay here. Kill anyone else that comes out of there." "Yes, sir," the others said. Two towering men walked toward the bearded man, their spiritual energy rising. The bearded men scoffed, discarded the cigarette, and walked down to the basin. "Arkland is the land of our ancestors. Anyone who tries to get their hands on it will pay with their lives." The three leaped and darted toward the ruin, while the others slowly began to approach the ruin to set up rocket launchers around it. In the meantime, the fight between Logan and Wilbur had started. A fierce and terrifying force surged following each of Logan's attacks. Spiritual flames ignited on both his fists as he threw a series of punches from the distance. With each punch, the air detonated, echoing with a resounding roar, sending clouds of yellow sand billowing into the sky. Wilbur frowned. He had taken an offensive position as well when Logan attacked. He could not afford to waste time as the Red Sand Clan had headed into the ruins. Instantly, Wilbur gathered the dragon power, thunder power, and spiritual energy to launch a powerful strike. Though Logan was a powerful cultivator, Wilbur was confident that no one could rival him in terms of strength since he possessed the dragon power. With the aid of the thunder power and spiritual energy, he believed that he could take Logan down with a single blow. His fists, wrapped in red and white flames, were inches away from Logan. At the same time, Wilbur changed the spell he used. The attack itself should have been enough to disable Logan, but he decided to add an intermediate spell to be safe. Under normal circumstances, people like Logan who focused solely on strength were likely to be relatively weak in defense. The combination of the dragon punch along with an intermediate spell would cause severe injuries at the very least. Just before Wilbur's fist was about to come into contact with Logan's, he found his energy disappearing without a trace when he got closer to Logan. Chapter 695. His spiritual energy dispersed in an instant. Dragon power, however, was a pure force channeled into another attack directed at Logan. Logan simply shattered the force with two punches before charging toward Wilbur once again. Wilbur was momentarily stunned, as he had never encountered such a situation in the past. At that moment, Logan was merely inches away from reaching him. His fists were in the air and the spiritual flames burning around his fists threatened to surround Wilbur. In the midst of his shock, Wilbur used a boulder dragon bomb in an instant. A dragon head formed by sand rose before him and opened its mouth to fire a boulder the size of a basketball at Logan. Runes swirled within the boulder as it shot across the air in tremendous force. However, it instantly broke down as soon as it reached Logan. An invisible barrier seemed to surround Logan, and any spiritual power that approached him would be cancelled out, which surprised Wilbur. Logan darted toward Wilbur and roared, his fists raining down on Wilbur with tremendous force. Wilbur frowned and executed the godly training form, He could not use his spiritual energy for the time being and was forced to attack with just his dragon power. The spiritual energy and thunder power would disperse as soon as they left Wilbur's body. However, with the dragon power, Wilbur had nothing to fear from Logan. Still, how could Logan be so powerful? He was practically invincible. There were rarely any cultivators who could rival Wilbur in terms of sheer strength. Logan's punches were relentless and fierce, and each strike was followed by a rumbling that rivaled that of thunder. However, Wilbur's godly training form was extraordinarily formidable. He moved around Logan's side with incredible agility, countering Logan's fierce and forceful punches at each turn. His dragon power was extremely powerful as well, but he merely maintained just enough of it to resist Logan's power instead of unleashing the dragon power in full force. He wanted to see the truth behind Logan's abilities. Their figures danced like a carousel, constantly shifting within a few meters. Logan roared and relentlessly rained down punches with unstoppable dominance. However, Wilbur maintained a leveled head during the fight and was not at all at a disadvantage. The strength of godly training form demonstrated its strength in close combat. His elusive movements and attacks from odd angles surprised even Logan. Wilbur not only perfectly evaded his attacks but also counterattacked each time at unexpected angles and timings, leaving Logan feeling flustered. Furthermore, the fact that Wilbur could actually contend with him in terms of sheer strength astonished him. Enraged, the spiritual flames on Logan's fists intensified, and his attacks grew even fiercer. Wilbur dodged a round of Logan's attacks and launched a spell that attacked the spirit, shooting toward Logan's forehead. Unaware, Logan simply roared as he continued to swing his fists. Sounds of explosions echoed in the air as over a dozen massive fists formed from pure brute force, burning with flames and covered in runes, surrounded Wilbur. Logan took a swift step toward Wilbur and executed a lightning-fast hook punch aimed at Wilbur's abdomen. Numerous runes reappeared on Logan's fist, and his force was unstoppable, like that of a volcanic eruption that could destroy everything. Chapter 696. The attack on Logan's spirit failed as expected and faded as soon as it got close to him, just like what happened to Wilbur's spirit energy. Wilbur's expression darkened. At the same time, Logan landed a destructive blow, sending dozens of punches his way and sealing all potential routes Wilbur could use to escape. Logan sneered viciously. He was confident that even sanctuary-level cultivator would struggle to withstand a close blow from him. Wilbur simply scoffed, and red spiritual flames rose on his fists, swirling with runes. A terrifying aura exploded, followed by a deafening sound. The sand around them was sent into the air and completely covered their figures. Isabella's heart sank. From her perspective, Logan was simply far too powerful, and it looked as though Wilbur was barely surviving under his attack, as Wilbur had not made many counterattacks. She turned to Ryder worriedly to find him watching the members of the Red Sand clan without casting a single glance at the battle. It was as though he was not worried at all. Shortly after, the swirling sand settled. Wilbur and Logan stood 10 meters away from one another, and their gazes locked. Logan was visibly shocked. He could not believe that someone could rival him in terms of strength, as he possessed a Vira body, and considered himself the most powerful individual who reached a sanctuary level with sheer power. It seemed impossible that someone could match his strength, but he was oblivious to the true power of the dragon power Wilbur possessed. The ancient power of the dragons dates back to a different time and space, and humans simply were not built to rival it. Even if Wilbur only possessed a fraction of the dragon's power, it was enough to make him the strongest human. On the other hand, Wilbur, too, was shocked. Logan seemed capable of canceling out all spiritual attacks, and it was something that should not be possible at all. He searched through the memories of the dragon cell but could not find any information related to this. Meanwhile, Logan recovered from the initial shock and strode forward once again. He could not believe that someone could rival him in terms of sheer strength. Just then, Wilbur activated the Iris Veritas, hoping to find out how Logan managed to do such a thing. Soon, he noticed that there was a strange barrier a few meters away from Logan that could not be detected by human eyes, or spirit energy. Wilbur could not explain what it was, but he soon found out that the barrier was formed by the woman standing behind Logan. The woman was in her early 20s. She looked quiet and timid, yet the energy from the barrier originated from her. She was the one who controlled the barrier and protected Logan by deactivating any spiritual energy that came his way. In the midst of Wilbur's shock, he also learned that this ability was not possessed by Logan. If Logan truly possessed this ability, it would make him invincible. Logan was only shielded from all forms of spiritual energy because he was working with the woman, and the woman's ability seemed to be one that she was born with. Because of that, Wilbur could not detect it at first, and even his spirit energy was rendered helpless before her. At the moment, he needed to control or kill the woman in order to weaken Logan's defense. Upon consideration, Wilbur decided to capture the woman alive to study how her ability worked. Just then, the vicious man whom Logan worked for shouted, "Logan, don't waste your time with him. Let's head into the ruin." Chapter 697. Logan simply scoffed and turned to walk toward the man. The woman turned to glance at Wilbur apologetically before hurrying after Logan. The man stood up and stared coldly at Wilbur. "Don't bother us again, or I'll make sure you die a horrible death." Wilbur did not respond and simply glared at him. The man snorted and darted toward the ruin with Logan and the woman. Just then, Ryder and Isabella arrived by Wilbur's side. "What should we do?" Isabella asked anxiously as she watched the two other groups enter the ruin. Wilbur glanced at the Red Sand clan who were stationed outside the ruin and said, "We are heading inside as well." "What about them?" Isabella looked at the members of the Red Sand clan. "We will take care of them once we get out," Wilbur said. Isabella and Ryder nodded and the three headed toward the ruin. As soon as they entered, the two groups led by the man and by the Red Sand clan disappeared into the ruin almost immediately. Wilbur led his companions forward carefully. The ruin emitted an eerie atmosphere, and he knew that it could not possibly be safe. However, each group was clearly aiming to reach the castle in the center. Everyone knew that there was something hidden there, but no one knew what it was. Still, whatever it was capable of emitting tremendous energy, and whoever obtained it would either become extremely powerful or wealthy. Wilbur was determined to obtain it because he could tell that the item in the castle would make the perfect offering. It was a 1 in a million chance, and he was not about to let it slip. As they pushed forward, the waves of energy that radiated in the air became more apparent as they washed over their bodies. Isabella began to pale. Though she was a cultivator, she was merely a beginner and could not fully comprehend the force she was dealing with, so it was natural for her to fear it. However, her sense of duty meant that she could not back off, so she silently cheered herself up and attempted to chase her fear away. Wilbur glanced at her and shielded her with a gentle force of spirit energy. Isabella was oblivious to it but felt less scared. Wilbur smiled and kept pushing forward while Ryder followed closely behind him expressionlessly with the super cannon in hand. It seemed as though he was used to being in such situations. The streets of the city were covered in sand. There were dilapidated houses and ancient architectural styles on both sides, and under the lingering sunlight, it felt as though they had traveled back in time. Wilbur moved forward and surveyed his surroundings. It appeared entirely like architecture from the medieval period, marked by the traces left behind after erosion over the years. But why did it appear in this way, and what's hidden inside the castle? He wondered. At this moment, the sand on the streets and around the houses suddenly surged and compacted. In an instant, dozens of soldiers formed from compacted sand surrounded Wilbur and his two companions. The soldiers' faces were blurred, but their armor and weapons exuded spiritual energy, each possessing strength at the aura level. Isabella was instantly shocked. She instinctively pulled out her pistol and fired 3 rounds at the sand soldiers ahead. This was almost her instinctive reaction, a skill she had honed in the military. Meanwhile, the sand soldiers emitted hoarse roars and rushed toward Wilbur and his group. 3 gunshots sounded, all of them hitting the sand soldier ahead. The bullets passed right through its body, leaving 3 holes. However, it did not stop the soldier, and it continued to wield its spear fiercely, thrusting it toward Isabella. Utterly stunned by the unrealistic sight before her, she was rendered incapable of reacting.